I love three things: my redheaded woman, hitchhiking, and deadheads. One of my favorite deadheads, a deadhead who once picked me up hitchhiking, is this Tupelo deadhead who got me and my redheaded woman access to this rock and roll show up north close to New York City in this favorite club of ours. And he knew this show would sell out as soon as it went on sale. So he went ahead and got us access to it. Great thing for him to do Valentine's week. The show is 1,000 miles from where we are in New York City. So I have a book of hitchhiking stories, 418 pages from my 40-year career of hitchhiking. It's also a book of good people and good travel and good dogs and good rock and roll. And with an ebook, you can't level a table, but I can sell it to you for $10. And if I sell 100 of them, then I can take my redheaded woman to this great rock and roll show that this great deadhead got us access to. So if you're not familiar with hitchhiking stories, I've got one for you that I'm going to read to you from the book. But let me tell you, $10, you get your own copy of this 418-page book, and you get it at oxfordland.net. Now I'm going to read one of my favorite hitchhiking stories from Dear Tonda, the name of the book. And it's called, this one is After Panic, I Never Panicked. Rock and roll reading glasses, ladies and gentlemen. Tripping over my thumb. And after panic, I never panicked. This is from 16 years ago in Memphis. Don't you hate it when you come to in a hotel room and you don't know where you are or whose hotel room it is? Well, yesterday afternoon in Memphis, I did that. I was on the floor. The beds had been slept in, though there was no one else in the room, nor was there any luggage or such, just me. The last I remembered, we were having a large time in a number of bars on Beale Street. I had wanted to go see the Felice Brothers at Proud Larry's in Oxford the night before, but Widespread Panic was playing in Memphis, and going to that show would mean getting to hang out with Lance and Bill and Allison and their kids and Bobby Farrell, who always has some cool chick hanging around him. And when JoJo, Panic's keyboardist, called me about coming to the show, I asked him to put me plus 2 on the guest list so I could bring 2 members of Afrosippi with some CDs and introduce them to the band, hoping to get an opener slot or 2. I hung around Oxford long enough to hear the Felice Brothers sound check at Larry's, and then the Afrosippi dudes had to bail at the last minute. I didn't know anyone else who wanted to go, and I couldn't drive up there to Memphis, and I did want to see Lance and the gang, so I started walking in bars asking likely suspects if they wanted to drive me to Memphis to the Widespread Panic show for 2 free tickets, backstage passes, and so on. Eventually, I found a couple at the Blind Pig who identified themselves as, I'm not making this up, Margot and Boris. And they were enthusiastic, and off we went. It was great seeing everyone, and about an hour or so after the show, the band took off for Atlanta. The rest of us went to Beale Street, and then I'm waking up in someone's hotel room. I waited around an hour or so, thinking someone I knew might return. But the house cleaning crew eventually chased me away, and I decided I needed to find a way back to Oxford. I remembered the Memphis band Free World was playing on the Thacker Mountain Radio Hour show on the Oxford Town Square at 6 p.m. When I finally reached the band, I had missed them by 18 minutes. So I was downtown, and I started walking up Union Avenue the mile or so to I-240, which would be a horrible place to start hitchhiking back to Oxford, but the best available. I found some cardboard, and I made a weak-efforted Oxford sign. When I walked by Sun Studio, out on the sidewalks, the usual freaks from various walks of freakdom were there. I guess there's no down season on such, even on a rainy mid-October Thursday afternoon. When I walked by the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue, no one was paying attention to me or him. I reached I-240 just a little after 5 p.m. and started walking down the ramp to get on the roadside curb with my Oxford sign. It was a rush hour mess I was adding to. I walked a mile or so south in the urbanity of Midtown Memphis I-240, and not far below the Lamar Avenue exit, an early 1980s Ford Bronco with a Mississippi Panola County license plate pulled over for me. Reaching it, I asked the driver, You going to Batesville? Man, I hope so. Batesville in Panola County would be 55 of the 75 miles back to Oxford. He was a blank-faced fellow with a bushy salt and pepper mustache, a Peterbilt cap, a Bass Pro Shops t-shirt, and he might have only been 40 years of age while looking about 60. Sardis was all he said to me. I got in. Batesville would have sure been better, but since there I could get out at the single-sex highway, and with Oxford only 20 straight miles away, my hitching prospects would have been much better. I wasn't complaining, though. It was very lucky anyone at all stopped in the rush hour mess. We rode down I-240 and down into Mississippi on I-55. He looked at me and asked, "You got a joint?" I apologized that I didn't and told him I hadn't eaten since the day before, but right then I'd rather have a joint because it's better for bone pain and I'd walked a few miles. He said nothing. He pushed in a Supertramp CD. My man had a great sound system, but unfortunately Supertramp is my least favorite band in history. They're great musicians, and I'm sure they're nice fellas, but just sure ain't my thing. My man turned up the volume so loud I wanted to cry. And one of the huge 1978 Supertramp hits played, and he repeatedly hit the repeat button. We heard it 4 times. Then he turned it off and we rode in silence for miles. I rearranged my bag on the floorboard, and he looked down at what I was doing and asked, "You about to roll one?" I apologized that I wasn't, and we drove on in silence. At the Sardis exit, he pulled over and said, "This is where I'm letting you out." I thanked him as he drove away. I started walking down I-55 toward Batesville, 9 miles away. I held out my Oxford sign as I walked. It was getting dark and raindrops were starting to fall on my head, shoulders, and Oxford sign. The rain never really got heavy, but the darkness was very dark. I walked all the way to the first Batesville exit. The pain from my bone problems was such that I was limping pretty bad when I reached there, but the worst part of the walk was walking over bridges in the dark with 18-wheeler tractor-trailer rigs going by about 18 inches away. There was only about a foot-wide ledge to walk on, and the damn rail is not even knee-high. I reckon they don't expect a lot of pedestrian traffic out there. The only really terrifying part was crossing the long bridge over the Tallahatchie River and surrounding marsh. The water was up because of the recent heavy rain, and I could see it black and deathly, especially when trucks roared by. I thought about Billy Joe McAllister. At the first Batesville exit, I had to face reality, that my limp had gotten too bad and I should walk down to the 2 gasoline stations there and see if there were any cars with the Lafayette County plates. At the bottom of the ramp, in the darkness on the edge of the station's light, sat a state trooper. Hitching is illegal everywhere in Mississippi, but I had to ask him for a ride. I motioned for him to roll down his window. He did and said nothing. I told him the circumstances and asked for a ride down to the next exit. He looked at me a moment and said, "What's going to happen there?" I told him I had a lot better chance of hitching a ride to Oxford. He looked at me for another moment and said, "Get in." We rode down to the Batesville exit, and he started to let me out under the I-55 bridge, but decided to drive on a little further to the BP gasoline station. He pulled in, and as I was getting out of the car, he told me to be extra careful and wished me good luck. I thanked him and turned to look toward the station, where a 4-door of Longhairs was emptying out, and the driver was none other than Marlowe Durra. The Longhairs were his band. "Marlowe," I said, "what are y'all doing?" "We're headed to Oxford to play at Larry's opening for Rocket 88, he said, and looked at the state trooper pulling away. "What are you doing?" So I rode to Oxford in the middle of their back seat with a PB amp on my lap. It was a great ride, and not just because they had a bottle of Jägermeister and the Wonderful going around. In seemingly no time, we were at Larry's, where Marlowe's band and Rocket 88 turned in a killer show. 45 minutes after I was limping down the side of I-55 in the rain and dark, I was on the town square in Oxford, feeling great. God bless Mississippi.